Hey everybody, and welcome to the Multidimensional Nerd. This is a long time coming, and this episode is really dedicated to describing the story and the journey that we have taken to get to this particular point. I am really appreciative that you guys decided to join me on this whole thing. It's been a long way to get here. Through a lot of different iterations. I'm going to explain how we came to the name, the Multidimensional Nerd. As we go through all of this. But first and foremost, I want to make sure that all of you guys know that we have a new website out. So the Multidimensional Nerd is produced by Forerunner Productions. That is my company. For those of you that don't know, my name is Chad W. Garrett. You can find me. I got a book out and all this other crazy and type of stuff. But Forerunner Productions, www.forerunnerproductions.com will take you to our website. We have articles. I'm going to be releasing stories over there. There's a story called The Dark Chimera that I've been working on. It's going to be a multi-season serial release, and then as the seasons get finished, we will be releasing like audiobook versions very similar to what we're doing on Story Dose, except specifically for that particular book. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure that you guys go over to www.forerunnerproductions.com for me, and we'll go from there. This whole gig started when I wanted to have a career in public speaking. And then a mentor of mine told me, I was like, well, if you want to have a career in public speaking, you need two things. You need to start a podcast, you need to write a book. Because if people don't know what you're going to say before they hire you, they're not going to hire you to come and say anything because they don't know you, they don't care why you have anything to say. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So I got together with some friends, bought some knockoff equipment off of Facebook Marketplace, took it over, tried to start loading it up and figuring out what we were going to do with it. And that all turned into the West Meadow Show with my buddy Andre, and there was our buddy Carl there for a little bit. And then from there, the West Meadow Show was something that was really successful. It was just a group talk show where we had different topics. We came in, we talked about it. And we're going to be bringing that back actually as a part of the Multidimensional Nerd. So we're going to be having honorary nerds come in, unless it's Andre. If Andre comes in, he's just a nerd. There's no honorary about it. He has requested that, and I have dubbed him a nerd. He is also, if anyone else that I know deserves the name Multidimensional Nerd besides me, it is him. So we're going to be bringing that back, and we're going to be having these group conversations as well. I'll come up with a schwanky new name for that, or maybe I won't, and we'll just have like a group show, and you'll be surprised whenever we have a group show and group talk show, whatever. So we're doing the West Meadow Show, and Andre looks at me one day and he's like, dude, you need to do a solo show because the conversations are great, but you've got a lot that you need to say. And that was the birth of the Chad Garrett Show, because I modeled a lot of our company based off the Daily Wire. I modeled a lot of our podcasts and the format of these things off of Backstage Live and the Ben Shapiro Show and all these other things. And so the next step of that was for me to do a solo show. And that became the Chad Garrett Show. And the Chad Garrett Show, I tried to keep it short, 20 minutes for a little bit. And then Chase was very good at helping me do that and breaking it up into multiple parts. And then as I started having to branch out on my own, because Chase, our audio video tech, because he moved and he wasn't able to be a part of the recordings quite as much. He also had a kid, and having a newborn is quite invasive on what you used to consider your time. It is now their time, always. It is always their time. But kids are great, and I love kids. I love Hannah, his daughter. She is a blessing to all of us that she comes into contact with, and it's really amazing. She has an amazing story. I look forward to getting Chase's permission to tell her story one day. So the episodes started getting longer. We started doing things like my series on the Screw Tape Letters. We started doing things like the series on the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Well, the hard part about that is that I work a full-time job, and I didn't have time to come home every day, read and write content to be able to keep that up week to week to week to week. So it sort of fell at the wayside. I stumbled on the idea of Story Dose one day because I realized how much I love reading to people. If I'm reading something, especially whenever I'm reading great things, I love to be able to share those things. I also love sharing movies and stuff. And it's always about the story for me. It's always about the tendrils of the story and what are the flaws of the story? What are the boons of the story? How does this story work? Why do we love this thing? And then why do we not love certain stories? That's one of the other things I want to get into eventually with you guys is I want to talk about why certain stories don't work as well as others. fast forward a little bit again, the Chad Garrett show sort of dies out. The West Meadow show can't be happening anymore because we lost our studio space where we were hosting a lot of that. And so we ended up going to Story Dose and my dad's two shows that we produced for him. So it's The Shelter Hole and Let's Talk Fortitude. So interview-based show. Oh, and I was keeping up with Impetus. So Impetus is great. I love Impetus. Impetus is a conversation-based show. Right now it's really formal. I think that the more we do Impetus, the less formal it's going to become. But it's been a good formula for us so far, and I've really enjoyed having that as a format. So that will continue to go on. And so Let's Talk Fortitude and Impetus have now gone to a season format. Chad Garrett show sort of just disappeared because I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. Story Dose is going to be the new Chad Garrett show. And then I was on the phone with my mom one day, and I forget what it was that we were talking about. I think we were talking about law and like the Constitution. And then I got into history, and I related that history to a movie somehow. And she just said, like, you're like a multi-dimensional nerd. And she meant it as like a joke, kind of like an insulting joke. She was trying to make fun of me a little bit. She was trying to poke fun. And I was like, that's kind of good. And so what was never meant to stick, and Chase hates this because it's so on the nose for me, but the branding works. We became, or I became known now, and we rebranded the Chad Garrett show, and Story Dose falls into this as the multidimensional nerd. And I am really enjoying all the things that I can do, because whenever I was doing the Chad Garrett show, the reason why I called it that wasn't because I cared to get any real flack off of my name or any real clout off of my name. I did it that way because that's what all the great guys were doing. If you want to be like the greats, do what the greats do, right? The Michael Knowles show, the Andrew Klavan show, the Ben Shapiro show, the Megyn Kelly show, right? But then again, all these guys are like the Dave, the Rubin Report, right? Like all these guys are doing these things, but they're doing them in the politics realm. And as fired up about politics as I'll get, politics isn't my realm. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to spend my life in politics. I don't particularly want to run for office. Like, not saying I never would, but God forbid, I pray that I never have to. What I wanted to talk about was stories. What I wanted to talk about was tendrils of policy, right? I want to talk about law. I want to talk about politics. I want to talk about what's happening, but I want to talk about it in the context of like why it matters to our society. So many people get caught up in the murky details that never pan out to be anything, right? A flashy headline, it never turns out to be anything. And so the way that I sort of wanted to gear this thing was, let's talk about stories. Let's talk about Lord of the Rings. Let's talk about C.S. Lewis. Let's talk about movies, right? Like The Kingdom of Heaven and that story that I did. But also, like, let's talk about the Odyssey and Plato's Dialogues and Socrates and the philosophies of Antiquitas, right? And the Alexandrian period, and all of these things that didn't exactly like when you heard the Chad Garrett show, like, you don't, like, if you don't know me, like, who cares, right? But with the multidimensional nerd rebrand now, we're finally at a point where it's like, okay, yes, like, this is the direction that we want to go, right? Multi-dimensional nerd. Everything I talk about is going to be nerdy, right? It's just, it will be, because it's the nature of who I am. I take things way too deep, way too far all the time. I'm going to make use of that, and I hope that you guys get some enjoyment. So I'm going to read to you with Story Dose. I'm going to talk about stories. We're going to talk about movies. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about anything and everything, especially the process of filming and dancing and stuff like that. But we're also going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about philosophy. We're going to talk about, like, I think I said philosophy twice there, maybe not, but either way, like, it's all going to culminate in this multi-dimensional perspective of the world that we live in. And because it's all like, it's this weird marriage of creativity and intellect, right? Logic. So, but both of these things are based around this idea of logos, right? Finding meaning. If there's one thing that I adore more than anything else, is trying to understand why things are important. What is the meaning behind them? It's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with guys like Jordan Peterson, even Joe Rogan, is because these guys talk about meaning so much. They talk about why stuff matters so much. And there's been a bit of a movement in our culture recently where people are starting to wake up to why Hollywood is so impactful, why television is so impactful. Um, People are beginning to realize that Shakespeare is not just for the Harvard educated man, that everyone can benefit from Shakespeare. As a matter of fact, Shakespeare was written for the common people. We have a hard time with that because of the language barrier nowadays. But Shakespeare, many of Shakespeare's plays, right, like Henry VIII or Henry V, I can't remember which one it was, but um, these things were written in some form and fashion as uh, ways to make fun of the things that were happening in England at the time that they were written. Certain plays, he specifically tried to make fun of the crown in a way that would make the queen laugh at herself because it was so well written and it was so well disguised. So things like that are important to us. I think that things like that, um, I think they matter. I think that they have real meaning, real substance behind them, and I hope that you guys are on board for the ride. I'm not going to introduce myself at the beginning of every episode. I don't really care about you guys knowing my name. Um, I might talk about my book a little bit. You're Not Special, You're Gifted. If you want to find that, it's on Amazon. We're also getting ready to release an audiobook about it, but or not about it, an audiobook for it. We have it recorded. It's mixed, mastered, ready to rock and roll. It's just a matter of figuring out how it is that we want to release this bad boy. Um, but that's a little insight of the future and what's to come. I think that going back through old journals and stuff would be cool because not everybody gets to do that. I think a lot of people expect that whenever they write a journal that they're expecting somebody else to come along in their life and or after they're dead and sort of document their way through and look at their journals and figure out like, okay, who is this person really? But doing that to ourselves, right? Like who was I really? It's uncomfortable, but it also I think gives us a lot of hope because we can see a lot of growth. I think that that's an important thing that we should start doing more often and more of. Another thing, I am a Christian, and one of the nerdy things that I like to do is I like to talk about history in the context of the Bible, and I like to draw conclusions from the Bible. I like to trace meta narratives, is what we call them. So big narratives that overarch an umbrella over the entire Bible, tendrils of stories and things that happen throughout the entire thing, hints that are given in certain parts of the Bible that either come to pass or come true later in the Bible. And it's not things that are overt, right? Like, sure, the Bible is very overt about how Jesus came to fulfill the law, right? But then there are tendrils of that show up if you look for them, that are not blatant. And it shows just how deep an understanding that the biblical authors both had of the source material that they were coming from, but also how just cool God is and how He lays everything out. So there will be some episodes like that. If Christianity isn't your thing, I still suggest that you like stick with it because the foundational principle of our Western society is the Bible, and so I think that everybody has something to learn. And even if you hate the Bible and you hate religion, you think God is evil and awful, or you don't believe in God at all, I think that understanding the book and its relation and context to history is really important for understanding our society. So I hope that you guys join me on that nerdy path as well. This thing's going to go anywhere and everywhere, right? We are multidimensional and we are just going to be nerdy as all heck. And I'm actually really excited for it. Another thing, one more thing that we are going to be doing. There's a couple of intellectual properties out there. We call those IPs that I am really looking forward to talking about bringing up more. One of them is Fantasy Fly's board game Twilight Imperium, that is supposed to be sort of this space opera that has a dice-based RPG game coming out. I really hope to run a dice-based RPG in that world and stream it sort of how Critical Role has done. I have some ideas on how I want to do it that will make it different and interesting and exciting, but I have to find a play group for it, and they need to release the setting book. So that's going to be a little while, but that is in the works. There is also an old IP called Legend of the Five Rings, also owned by Fantasy Fly now, but that game is actually no longer available. You can't even really play it unless you have old cards or what have you. And so it's difficult for people to get a grasp on how cool and how in-depth the story and the history and the culture, the lore of that game was. And I want to talk about this. I'm also going to be highlighting some other really awesome YouTubers and creators. One of the absolute best story creatives that's out there is a guy named Vati Vidya. He takes a video game series called the Dark Souls series, or just about any game that's from a company called From Software, and he breaks down the stories that are in them in a way that few people have ever done. He's a massive YouTuber. He has a massive audience. And so I'm going to be pulling a lot from his experience and from his videos and stuff whenever we go to talk about really tragic stories. I think that doing a series on the things that happen in Dark Souls, and not just, what the stories are, but why they matter. I think that that's where I differ from Vati quite a bit, where I will lean heavily on his content as a crutch. But whenever it comes to why it matters and what we should take away from these stories and apply to our own lives, or understand about people that do apply these things to their lives, I think that that's going to be really important. So that's a little bit of like how we got here to this rebrand. I think that this one's going to stick. I don't expect that this one's going to go anywhere. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this quick episode. It's not really quick. This is about how long we want it to be in the future. I'm going to try and keep these things, 15, 20 minutes. Thank you guys so much for tuning in again, and head over to www.forerunnerproductions.com. Also, hit the like button, drop a comment, smash the subscribe if you haven't. It helps us so much. As everybody knows, doing those things, I need you guys to help us get the word out about this. This whole thing is going to be educational. It's going to be entertaining. It'll help you discover new stories to go and experience, right? One of the things that people often ask is well, what's the next story that I should try and experience, right? I just read this. What else is like it? This is going to be a cool place for you to come to, right? If video games aren't your thing, I'll help you with a movie. If books aren't a thing, I'll help you with that. But I need to know what you guys need in order to be able to help craft the content to you. And be able to share these things. I'll be able to share how I do story analysis and how I do content edits for people. I'll be able to share with you how I content edit my own content. All these things. It's all going to be right here. So make sure that you guys smash the subscribe button, ring the bell so you never miss an episode, and drop a like for me. If you would be so kind, drop a comment. Let me know what it is that you want to see in future episodes. We will be re-releasing some of the old Chad Garrett Show episodes under the Multidimensional Nerd. And when we do that, I plan on taking episode series, like the Lord of the Rings episode series that I did, and finishing them. However, I'm not going to try and do it in a timely manner just because it takes so long to read those books. However, I will finish that series eventually. I got really burnt out reading all 4 books, going from The Hobbit through The Return of the King. Doing that and doing all the other things that I've had going on was tough. So thank you guys so much again, and we'll see you in the next one.